right, now, let's do some fan questions.
Surprise, surprise, Uncle Chael, your favorite medical students are back!
What's up, Uncle Chael? How's it going, man? Today we have a juicy question for you about Ariel Helwani.
Yeah, what are your thoughts on the Helwani-Dana White scuffle, Will things ever get smooth between those two?
And we know he's a good friend of yours, but, your honest thoughts.
Yeah, love you, Uncle Chael. Take care.
All right, great work, fellas, and great to hear you guys back again. Now, the quick story on Ariel and Dana, as I understand it. Ariel had a piece of MMA news, and Ariel, who is a journalist, sees it as his role to break inside stories and then bring that to the masses, not to protect inside stories for the industry. Ariel is a man of the people. Ariel comes to the people with information as quickly as he can get it. That is how he views himself. That is what he went to college to do. That is in line with the integrity of those professors who taught him. What happened, though, is once Ariel had the scoop, the UFC found out Ariel had the scoop and went directly to Ariel and said, hey, we know you have this, but we're about to drop it tonight in an extra special way. And by the way, it was a kind of expensive way, but we've got our own way of doing this. Please say nothing so that our reveal to the live audience is extra special. And that was it. And the UFC had the right to ask him that. They've gone, hey, Ariel, we've done you 20 favors. All these stories you get and all this access that you have, we've granted that to you. This time, great job. You scooped us. Don't know where our leak was, but we need you to pull the reins in. Could you do that for us? Great, thank you, bye. Click, and no. Ariel sent it out. That's the way that story happened. And so it was just kind of hard to get those guys back together. It felt like a trust issue. Ariel felt as though he was having his integrity compromised by doing his job successfully, but then being asked to sit on a story. Dana's doing, yeah, but it's my story. It isn't salacious. There's no conspiracy here. It's an exciting announcement. I just like to be the one to make it. I have an order. I do things. And when it comes to the announcement, it's going to be in tonight's pay-per-view, prepackaged B-roll, live reaction from the audience, on sale and a date for everybody else. Let me do it my way. It seems pretty simple what you would have done here, but boy, they never really got that one put back together. I mean, after that happened, it was a trust issue. More than anything else, it was just a trust issue. And they didn't get it put back together. And if you're asking me what I think needs to happen, probably the sincerest of apologies. A phone call, a handwritten letter wouldn't be bad. Here's how I viewed that. It's pretty clear how I should have viewed that now, but this was my first time. Every dog gets 2 bites. That was my first. Come on, give me one more.
Aldine from St. Louis here. Mr. Chael, I got a question for you. Now, first off, I know that you MMA guys are a different breed. I know that 99.99% of us would not walk into a cage in our underwear in front of 25,000 people and get into a fist fight with another grown man. But here's my question. A couple days ago, I had to leave a family gathering because I was feeling nauseous. I felt like throwing up. I had a headache. A few days prior to that, I almost had to leave work because of a runny nose, because of flu-like symptoms, My question is this. I assume that because you guys are crazy as you are, that does not make you immune to these little things like a cold, a flu, and so on, just feeling nauseous, feeling like throwing up. So how do you guys deal with that? If fight night comes and you have these symptoms, I think everybody assumes that you just put them aside, just ignore them, just go in there and do your thing. How many fights? Do you know of any stories of any major fights, of any major fighters that something, not an injury, but something like this has affected? I'm really kind of curious, because we as fans, we get upset when a guy pulls out due to a legitimate thing. At the same time, most of us call in sick with a runny nose or whatever it is. So I see the hypocrisy, and I'm just curious on any stories that you might know. Again, not major injuries, not major things, health concerns, but just small things like, feeling nauseous, headache, runny nose, or whatever the hell. Thank you, man. Appreciate all the fan questions, and keep doing what you're doing. You're doing a hell of a job.
Yeah, I think I understand the question, and I will tell you, there's all the tough guy talk on that of suck it up and push through it anyway and get through it and whatever it takes and all of these buzzwords. Those are really nice to say from your perch, but if you're the guy in that position, I mean, I will just tell you as a coach, if one of my athletes says, I'm sick and I can't go out, we don't then have a conversation. There's not a dialogue. I say, okay, I get him whatever help he thinks he needs. And a lot of times that could be, just give me some rest. Just get me home. If that was more extreme as, hey, get me to the doctor and get an ambulance here to do it. If that was a situation, I've never been in that one in fairness, but if that were, I would take the athlete at its word. For myself, I don't think I ever was violently sick. The nights that you throw up or you've got a fever, those are really hard to compete. When you've got a fever, temperature of any kind, you're trying to cool your body down and your body's just wanting to naturally sweat and it gets naturally fatigued at a lot more rapid pace. Boy, those are hard nights to go out and perform. I had a different code. The contract was signed. No matter what, I was going to make that walk. That's a tough guy thing, and that's a tough guy thing to say, but it is not a tough guy thing that I would impose onto my own athletes. I would take them at their word. Hey, I can't go out tonight. Fair enough. We'll find a way. I'll talk to the promoters. We'll redo it another day.
Hey, Chael, Roland Wixer from Germany. The UFC heavyweight champion is supposed to be the baddest man on the planet, but is he really if the division has an upper weight limit? And I'm not saying they should sign 400-pound fat guys. I'm just talking about athletic guys that are around 290 pounds, like Brock Lesnar. So it's a disadvantage if they have to cut weight, and guys like Stipe Miocic don't have to. So just get rid of the upper weight limit, sign athletic guys, not fat guys, and yeah, we could truly find out who the baddest man on the planet is. What do you think?
Well, I'll tell you, that's the way that it used to be. They didn't used to call it heavyweight. They used to call it unlimited. And you could be 400 pounds. You could be 500 pounds. The problem with your argument is there has not been very many heavyweights ever that ever met the limit. I know when Alistair Overeem was on a big run, he was right there at that 265. Mark Hunt went all the way to number one contenderships, and he was having to cut to make that 265. Derek Lewis had a couple of close calls at 265. Brock Lesnar, who you bring to mind, was all of the weight class. But boy, I might have just summed them up. And I didn't even go with champions. I slipped one champion in there, and the rest were just some top 10 guys or names that you would know. In large part, those bigger guys, those really bigger guys, just haven't done well, and that includes in combat. Maybe you had one of the Klitschko boys that was just so tall that all of a sudden he was a little bit closer to the limit. But throughout history, there does seem to be a tipping point. And I'm not for exclusion, and I'm certainly not trying to give you a message that if a guy weighs X amount, he therefore is no longer a tough guy. He's a slow, slobbish guy that needs to, be on a line in a football team somewhere. No, I'm not doing that either. I'm just looking at it and letting you know. Muhammad Ali in his prime was 198 pounds. Mike Tyson in his prime was 220 pounds. Stipe Miocic, the two times he grabbed the world title, once was at 141 pounds and more recently at 230 pounds. Point being, the really bigger guys haven't fared that well in the sport. I don't love the cap myself. I think if you're going to have a heavyweight class, I don't love the cap. The cap even went from unlimited, it dropped down to 285. Then they dropped it to 275. Then they moved it back to 286. And then for reasons unknown, it's now just 265. So I am always open to adding and expanding that. And you are right, it is exclusionary to certain athletes that if they want to be given their opportunity, I'd like to see them given their opportunity. But I felt like your question was more of, how did we get to this point? And that's your timeline. It went from unlimited to 285, 75, 68, and now ultimately settled in at 265.
Hey, Chill, in a UFC title match, do you feel like the only way a fighter could validate them winning the title is by either submitting or knocking out their opponent? Because if you remember with Jorge Masvidal and Nate Diaz, Masvidal won the BMF belt based off a doctor stoppage, but Nate Diaz was fully ready to go, which tells me that Masvidal hadn't fully put him away. Just let me know what you think.
Well, I think there's a lot of ways to win a fight. I mean, don't forget, you got disqualification in there. You have forfeiture in there. We've seen that before. Was that Oliver McCall? Going into round 5, fighting Lennox Lewis, has a mental breakdown, starts bawling in tears, and just waves it to the ref. that was Roberto Duran. You will remember No Mas, where he just said no more. He wasn't cut. He wasn't unconscious. He wasn't even knocked down. He was fatigued. He was frustrated. He said, I give up. I mean, I don't believe that for any reason we wouldn't acknowledge Sugar Ray Leonard as the rightful winner that night. So no, I definitely don't think there has to be a finish known as a knockout or submission. I'm not even really sure how those became the most impressive of the ways to win. I think that was kind of in line at the same time as there was a bonus structure put in for knockout of the night or submission of a night. But as ways to win go, commissions do not look at one as greater than the other. A forfeiture, a disqualification, a no mas, a judge's decision. It all equals the same, it all pays the same, and it all advances you through the rankings the same.
What do you think about a Nate Diaz versus a Tony Ferguson? I think that would be a really fun fight to watch. I feel like they kind of have the same fighting style, especially how everyone says they like to fight off their back. But just in general, I think it'd be a good match to watch, fun for the fans. I'm not sure where everything's going to go now that Nate just lost and Tony's fighting Khabib soon. But maybe down the road we could hopefully see that fight. What do you think?
Yeah, I like that. I like that match a lot. It's surprising that those two have stayed separated for so long. You know, both with the jiu-jitsu, Nate with the Cesar Gracie, Tony with the 10th Planet. For some reason, Cesar Gracie and 10th Planet seem to get along. Disappointingly, right? If those guys were battling out on the grappling front, would make it even better. But same weight class, similar styles. I like what you're saying about the groundwork from both. And then also when you factor in the pace of both guys and the fact that they can both fight on their feet. I mean, they're very similar. If you go look at their skills and what they're good at, what they bring to the cage, they're very similar. And to your point, that's one I've always been curious about as well.
Hey, Chael. My question is regarding Daniel Cormier and his dirty boxing technique. I think he's the best at it, the best I've ever seen. And in the last two fights that he's done versus Stipe, that was my biggest takeaway. I mean, Stipe won the last fight, but my biggest takeaway was still how good Daniel is with dirty boxing. My question to you is, do you think Daniel is the best dirty boxer currently in MMA?
I think that Daniel does have some very good dirty boxing. He doesn't always use it to strike. Generally, dirty boxing, and Matt Lindland and Randy Couture had the phrase coined after them. Jens Pulver, who was the city world champion at the time, was working in the commentary booth, and Jens is the one that called that out and brought that term and phrase to the sport. What Jens meant by it, and I think we have to go by his definition since he's the one that coined it. He was talking about grabbing a guy behind the neck where they would break it in boxing. They'd stop. They call that dirty boxing. They say you have to let the guy go. But before you let him go, boom, you slammed one punch into him. Well, in MMA, you're allowed to get to this dirty box position, control the guy with one arm, and put the old hockey strikes on him with the other. What Randy Couture got so good at is once his arms tired out or his opponent started to flee, he would just switch arms. And now all of a sudden he's holding you with the opposite arm and uppercutting you with that free arm. Daniel Cormier does great clinch work, but I don't know that he would totally qualify as dirty boxing because when Randy, by example, would do it, that was a striking-based attack. And that wasn't going to end until that opponent fell down or found a way to get free of the striking-based. What Daniel does from his clinch work is he'll hit you, he'll knee you in the stomach, but then he'll trip you, he'll off-balance you, he'll drop to a single. He finishes his dirty boxing with takedowns. I think it's more advanced. So while my answer says maybe I'm not calling him the best dirty boxer, I believe what he is doing is more advanced than just basic dirty boxing, but I call it clinch work.
Hey Joe, it's Mohammed. First of all, I'm a big fan of your work. So I just wanted to ask a question about backup fighters in the UFC, and specifically in title shots. So let's take the Khabib-Tony fight as an example, because it's already fallen through 4 times before. But everything goes to plan. But if someone was to drop out, who did the UFC have as a backup fighter, and how does that work? Do they just look to the second best person, the number 2 contender, which in my opinion is Gaethje? And Gaethje has recently come out to say he isn't against the idea of being a backup fighter. And I just wanted to know how it works as well, and the mentality you have to go through to be a backup fighter, going to the training camp, cutting weight, without 100% certainty that you'll have an opponent at the end of it. Thank you.
All right, so how it works traditionally is one of 2 ways. The way it used to work and has worked from the beginning of time if the feature bout that you're asking about in question is contested at 155 pounds, amongst the other main card, which will be 4 more fights, one of those 4 fights will also be featured, planned for the pay-per-view portion at the same weight class, in this case, 155 pounds. Both of those guys know going into it, be ready, because if anything happens at the very top of the bill, one of you's coming out. That's the way it's. Now, they stopped doing that exclusively. They stopped doing that and started doing just a reserve fighter. Just go to a guy on a one-off, make weight, we'll send you your plane ticket, we'll get you your hotel, get all of your licensing done. If you get on the scale and absolutely nothing happens after that, go enjoy a great dinner, have a front row seat. Here's a check for being here for us. Should you need to step in, here's a whole new check, here's a whole new deal. That's a fine way to do it if we play that up. If we got a guy in the batter's box, I think there's something exciting about that. I think that needs to be steered into. The company disagrees with me, and they think if you put any focus in the guy in the batter's box, it eludes that you're not positive you can keep together 1 and 2, and so they don't like to do that. Now, we've never done it. It would only be an experiment, but in my opinion, the experiment would go very well. I'm digressing for right now because, to your point, I also heard Justin Gaethje say, I'll be the guy. I'll be the guy that sits out. The rankings all back it up. The guys have both said they would fight me. I will be the guy. I will sit on ice. He went further to say, but it's a little hard for me to stay motivated for a fight that I don't actually have. And that is where I would like to say, okay, instead of doing this batter's box thing, why don't we just get Gaethje a fight that night with Kevin Lee? We'll just get them together, him and Kevin Lee. They'll train for it. They'll make weight for it. They'll come out. They'll be ready to do it. If something happens at top of the bill, we can move Gaethje on up. I think that that's a better way to do it, because if it doesn't happen, then let's have Gaethje and Lee fight for the match that they trained for anyway, and probably a chance of becoming the new #1 contender.
What's up, Uncle Chael? So I got a question for you. We have Cowboy versus Conor in January, and we have Khabib versus Tony in April. Let's say Conor comes away with the win in January. Khabib versus Tony almost happened 4 times. Let's say it falls through. Do you think there's a chance that McGregor takes the place of whoever gets injured or whoever can't come April 18th if that were to happen?
Well, absolutely, I do. Now, I do because you said, is there a chance? And I have to tell you, it would go off of rankings a lot. And I don't mean in line with rankings. It would go away from the rankings because these guys chose, I'm talking Conor and Cowboy, they've chosen to fight at 170 pounds. So whatever business and whatever achievements they have at 170 pounds, it stays ranking-wise within 170 pounds. And I don't see how you could come down if we're just being reasonable guys. Now, we understand the power of the pen. We understand, of course, that anything can happen. But if we're being reasonable, I don't know how you possibly do get around the Justin Gaethje argument. I just think that gets a little bit harder and harder to do. So if you were looking for a big action, if you went to Justin first, if Justin said, oh, you know, my whole shoulders hurt or I can't come to terms, and you need, once you start to get in that game where you're Dana White, you've done everything right. You've made 2-3 phone calls first, and 2-3 guys that are less for business but more appropriate for integrity tell you no. Now you can get out of the integrity game and get over to the business game, and a guy like Conor's phone just might ring.
Got a question for you. I was watching round 39 of your fan questions, and somebody had mentioned what they thought of a fight between Stephen Thompson and Lyoto Machida. Now, I have a question to piggyback off that. We all know what a decorated career Stephen Wonderboy Thompson had as a kickboxer. And we also know that Israel Adesanya is not a very big middleweight and could probably easily make welterweight. And you also have to throw in Michael Venom Page from Bellator. In a kickboxing match and or an MMA match, out of those 3, who do you think would reign supreme?
All right, I wish I would have heard your matchups a little bit clearer. So let's make it all kickboxing just to change the dynamic. And I believe the 3 that you narrowed it down to, if I heard correctly, but you got Izzy in there, Izzy Adesanya. I heard Venom Page in there for sure, but I believe you stuck with Wonder Boy and somehow Machida's name got moved from the list. That's how I think I heard you, and it's all kickboxing. Between the 3 of those, I think I would favor Adesanya because the other two are welterweights. But if you wanted to get those guys kickboxing and you want to just ask me what match I would be most compelled to watch, it would definitely be MVP taking on the champion Izzy. Do it at 185 pounds. Use that for the storyline that MVP is a little bit lighter because that makes him a little bit faster. And if you know how fast MVP is, if you're an MVP fan to start with, I think that would add to some of the fan base of MVP. I think you could have a lot of fun there.
Uncle Chael, I'm absolutely honored to be able to submit you a video for your review. First and foremost, thank you for allowing your fans the opportunity to do so. I learn something new every day, whether it's MMA or a good old life lesson from Uncle Chael P. Much appreciated. So, you said a couple things the other day that I want to open up some dialogue on. And I'll quote you too. And these are real quotes because I'm not a charlatan like Dan Le Batard, okay? Conor, from his own admittance, some of those shots and some of that power and the effectiveness and the results that those shots garnered isn't the same at 170 pounds. And you also said the likelihood that Cowboy Cerrone getting knocked out at 170 drops. Hold it right there. What proof do we have that Conor's power doesn't transfer over to 170 pounds? The only guy who's fought there is Nate Diaz, someone who's never been completely knocked out before. So how would that transfer over to someone like Donald Cowboy Cerrone, who's been awful chinny these days, especially in the Gaethje fight? I know Gaethje hits hard, but come on. I don't know. Don't you think we should be paying more homage to Nate's chin in that case? And don't you think, Conor probably just carries over the same amount of power, just for the less amount of rounds? Let me know your thoughts. Thanks, Chael.
Well, I think that's fair for speculation. I was trying to get a little bit more scientific with it, okay? Conor is walking around about 163 to 165 pounds. Relevance there. When Conor was fighting at 155, he would get in the ring about 163 to 165, sometimes as high as 167. With that weigh-in in mind, he's now 2 to 4 pounds less than he used to be. So when you're talking about power transfer, and sure, we've seen welterweight move on up to middleweight, but he weighs all of middleweight. Anthony Rumble Johnson might be a fine example. A welterweight who moved to middleweight, a middleweight who then moved to a light heavyweight that moved to heavyweight, but his body went with it, so that power was all still there. He just had a little bit more speed and finesse. We saw that work out. What I'm telling you with Conor, from my opinion, is that he may run into the same problem with Cowboy that he ran into Nate, which is I'm in a higher weight class, but I'm not a bigger guy. I'm now just fighting a bigger guy. And a bigger guy can absorb more of a shot. The way a punch works is when it hits you, it will send a shock down through your entire body. Well, some guys with the real big hips and big ass, they can almost get grounded out right there. Boom, it hurts. Ooh, starts to get into those muscles, some of that size region, it's gone. It doesn't shoot all the way through their calves and out their toes. There's just something about being grounded, something about hitting a bigger target. And when I see Conor not becoming bigger himself, I'm sure the shot is just as hard. I'm just arguing, and I'm getting this largely from Conor. Hit Jose Aldo one time, walks away with the world championship. Hits Eddie Alvarez 5-6 times, walks away with the world championship. I'm suggesting for you when he gets in there with Nate, according to Conor and his experience with Nate, I hit that guy just as clean and just as hard and with just as many punches and with just as many power. He was just able to absorb it. And then Conor came away saying, because of his size. Now, I hear what you said. You said maybe we shouldn't make this about Nate's size. We should just pay homage to his chin. I don't disagree with you. I just don't know. So when I don't know something, but I'm being told something by one of the principals, in this case, Conor McGregor, I am compelled to listen.
Chael, quick one from me. Who has the best line on the mic in UFC history?
Best line on the mic in UFC history. Okay, so has that got to be in the ring? I think that's got to be in the ring. Like, it can't just be a fight guy that says something funny somewhere. So, in the ring, this was a real simple one. Rampage Jackson told everybody, he said, come on down to the such and such club and have drinks on me, but on me doesn't mean I'm buying. That was the line. And it just, I remember everybody laughed. Everybody was confused because on me generally does mean you're buying. That was it. That was the line when I was in a living room with friends watching. That one is what got the loudest reaction of any.